Soft skills are the new hard skills. And welcome back to Tuned In with InterSys, where we are continuing the conversation in our More Than Bilingual series. And today I have the privilege of having with me Joachim Lépine, who is with Lion Translation Academy and bestselling author.
Writing is a form of thinking. It's hard. It requires that real active engagement, but that is exactly the engagement that you need in order to build relationships. And they were like, I don't know, let's ask ChatGPT. And I was absolutely floored. I don't want to know what ChatGPT thinks. The average of everything on the internet is not the person I want to talk to right now. I want to talk to you because I really believe with all my heart that we're stronger together when we think about these things together and we use our own brains before turning to AI, then we can find solutions. There are ways.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Tuned In with InterSys, where we are continuing the conversation in our More Than Bilingual series with language professionals and multilingual professionals across different, niches and spectrums of a business. And today I have the privilege of having with me Joachim Lépine, who is with Lion Translation Academy and best-selling author, who is here to talk about his most recent edition or publication that he has put out there. And I just really have a lot to ask and discuss. The book, YouGPT Before ChatGPT. And so, first of all, Joachim, thank you for accepting my invitation and allowing me to kind of share with my community your perspective and why this particular topic is so current, so necessary. And I think hopefully will kind of empower the next generation of language professionals to utilize what is a very helpful tool, but in a strategic way, one that kind of supports the art of translation and spoken language. So with that, welcome. And again, thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here, Johnny, and can't wait to dig in.
Excellent. So I'm just going to share a few things I enjoy about the book. But before we get into that, just for our audience and those that are unfamiliar with your background, you and I have been engaging on LinkedIn for some time. We're talking offline about sharing similar circles. Please share with us, how did you get into this space of language services and, kind of this passion for written and spoken language? What's your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I grew up in the USA and I studied in Canada. I went back to live in the US. I had studied music originally and I had no idea what I was going to do after, just no clue. And was wondering, where am I headed with all this? I never really felt comfortable on a stage. So I didn't really want to be a performer. I ended up taking a teaching job with mixed results, shall we say. I taught high school for a couple of years and loved working with people. I loved, explaining things to people. Like I remember even in my first undergraduate degree, like I always would learn something in class and I'd walk outside the class. In my mind, I would naturally think, how would I put this into a system? Or how could I create a framework to optimize this and help people with it? And I wish I'd honored that sooner. But long story short, I ended up teaching music for a couple of years, not being sure it was quite the right fit, moved back to Canada and realized, when I went to teach that I would have to redo all my studies because Quebec did not recognize foreign degrees for teaching high school in particular. So through a long series of fortunate events, I sort of had like a breakdown where I was like, what am I doing with my life? Who am I? What am I doing here? I'm not sure the whole music thing is what I want to do. And so I started a music program to teach music again, and just, total breakdown. It was like, why am I in this classroom? Why am I redoing all my courses? Am I really going to do a 5-year program to relearn everything I've learned? And by that time, I had started a master's degree in education. So I was like, I was just feeling really lost. And at that time, I took a translation course because I thought, if I'm going to live in Quebec, my parents had always spoken to me and my brothers in French at home growing up in the US, mostly outside of Philadelphia and Haverford. Okay. My brothers and I would answer in English. So anyway, when I moved to Quebec, I was like, I can speak French, but I've never had to write it in my life. I've just never had to write it. But I'm a voracious reader. I've got readers everywhere where, in my house, I always have had tons of books. And I thought, okay, I've got to take a course to improve my French. So I took a couple of grammar courses, and I just whizzed through those courses. Like I ate it up. I loved it. Most of the other students were like, oh God, not grammar. And I was like, this grammar is fascinating. Bring it. I love it. This is so cool. It's so fascinating to look at how the French language works and all the intricacies and stuff. And I was just blazing through these French courses. And I took one more that was a translation course, like English into French. This was specifically on the comparative stylistics of French and English. And that was where there's a click, like a soul level click. I was like, oh my God, like I think I found what I want to do. I don't know where this is headed, but I love languages. I love culture. I love the intersection of the two. I love how there are systems, like it's not random chaos. You can master the systems, and there's a way that you can explain things to people. And I ended up doing the degree in translation. Then I went on to found my translation business. I taught university courses. So I taught all the courses I loved so much. I did that for 15 years. And then with my colleague Anne-Marie, shortly after the pandemic, like in 2022, we founded our own online platform to help translators to survive in this new era, Lion Translation Academy. So today I kind of get to do what I love most, which is public speaking and writing and creating courses. So like I'm honoring my initial love of creating systems and helping people, but doing it in a field that feels 100% aligned. So it was a long journey coming here, but that's essentially what I do today and what I love.
That's a awesome story. Kudos to you for following that path and just kind of, following your passion. I think that's really one of the biggest challenges for most people, is to align what we do with the things we enjoy, where it doesn't feel like work, right? And It just feels like something that we would do. We won't tell anybody this, but even if we weren't being paid, we'd probably do it. But it's great that we can make a living doing what we enjoy. So exactly. That's awesome. And it makes a lot of sense too when, going to your book now, YouGPT Before ChatGPT, how to implement human-centered AI, that it really, helps us improve, as you mentioned here in your introduction. What I really enjoy is that regardless of what chapter you follow, like certain books obviously follow a cadence or a certain flow. But what I really like about, and I'll share this with those that are listening here with us, it uncovers, improves decision-making, uncovers hidden opportunities, and scales revenue, part of your YouGPT series. And some of the topics, I'm not going to read them all, but just to kind of give an idea for those that haven't already purchased it, like I did for 99 cents, which was a phenomenal deal. But even at the current price, it's a steal, whatever price you pay. But just some of the topics here, it mentions here, this is your brain on AI. And I'm just going sporadically of some of the topics that caught my eye. How to dream, imagine, and go the last mile. Your AI alignment and integrity. Also, the AI lexicon for executive decision makers, not engineers. And one that I really wanted to kind of maybe pause on for a moment, because I think it resonates with my recent experience. Chapter 10, soft skills are the new hard skills. And the reason I chose this one particularly was because there definitely has been, and your book mentions this, of how things changed with the pandemic and COVID, and kind of how teaching even was impacted, talking about your background in teaching because of COVID, how everyone had to adjust. And unfortunately, some of the effects that continue on today are kind of this distance, right, that we have, and also a lack of soft skills, right? The ability to, my personal experience, which I enjoy still doing, is picking up the phone or doing a video conference and having a spoken word conversation versus like a chat on which I use it like, everyone. And there's value in that, of course, as far as time management and everything. But there's no substitution for that element of building relationships with a spoken conversation. And I have found recently that it could be a little frustrating, to be honest, kind of where we have a legitimate reason for a conversation, because I am definitely one of those supporters of picking up the phone when necessary. Obviously no one wants to waste time and everybody wants to be efficient, but I feel like I do a relatively good job of that. So when I'm reaching out to someone by email or text saying, hey, do you have a few minutes to maybe chat about XYZ? I usually have a legitimate reason for that, or something I want to bounce off that would just be, just not really effective doing it in written form. And the response that I have been getting more and more of, and, generationally now, you have the, now they're talking about generation alpha and all these, but
Right.
Even going back to maybe Z and the, generations that are in between, is this kind of very palpable feeling of not wanting to have a verbal conversation. And to the point where the response I get is, I don't really see where I can add any value to that topic. And so maybe it's just best to talk to this other person. And so do you feel, here's the question, that is something that is in line with your kind of, message here of this lack of soft skills? Maybe it isn't so much because people don't want to acquire it, but maybe it's just a symptom of the fact that maybe because of circumstances, it's almost being lost in how it's being, kind of educated, taught, and shared with the current generation and future generations, if you will.
I think you're absolutely right. And this is, in a way, it's a problem, but it's also an opportunity. I think that people who do pick up the phone, the people who take the time to get to know their clients, and not just clients, but, I call them like business friends. Like, I consider you a business friend. We know each other. We move in similar circles. There are a million different ways we can add value to each other's projects. It's so worth having a conversation. But you're right. And we think about it, there are a lot of different things that feed into this, right? There's the pandemic, and then we all got used to being more isolated. There's the greater digitization of everything, where like, we forget this, but a few years ago, a lot of businesses didn't even really have an online presence, or just had like a little Google business thing. Now they've got a website with like a chatbot, right? Everything has become technology mediated, or almost everything. And so it's unfortunate because we're missing out what gives meaning to our lives. And I think that muscle can atrophy, right? If you don't take the time to build social skills, they can perish. They really can. And I even I'm thinking of someone who was telling me recently that at their workplace, it's like everyone can work from home now. It's an option. And they've really noticed how people are talking less, and people literally are losing their social skills, and like they're having a hard time communicating. And then there's other factors too. Like, we have to give ourselves some grace. Inflation is super high. So a lot of people are going out less maybe than they used to enjoy a night out on the town, or a night with their friends, right?
Sure.
And then you add this new layer of AI. This is kind of what impelled me to write YouGPT. It's like I was having a conversation with someone close to me, and I was like, hey, I'm thinking about doing this certificate at MIT. It looks really interesting. It's on human-centric AI. It looks fascinating. Do you think I should do it? And they were like, I don't know. Let's ask ChatGPT. And I was absolutely floored. It's like I got the wind knocked out of me, and I was like, whoa. Can we back up a second? I don't want to know what ChatGPT thinks. The
Sure.
average of everything on the internet is not the person I want to talk to right now. I want to talk to you. I want your heart and soul. And like, give me some pushback if you think this is a harebrained idea, right? And that's really what motivated the book. Is more and more I started talking to people, and I talked to people who work in businesses where, like, they'll tell me, if I ask them, like, do you use AI? They're like, everyone's kind of more in their corner now. Some businesses literally have like single places where you can eat alone. That's kind of new. Like, they install those after COVID. Some people need to be in their bubble now, right?
Right.
But a lot of them, they're like, we use ChatGPT. Everyone uses it. Everyone knows it, but no one says anything. And I'm like, that cannot be a good way forward with AI, for everyone to be secretly using it off in their corner. Like, where are we headed with this? And that's what really got me thinking about you know, I see a lot of people saying like, should we use AI? Should we not use AI? And I'm like, maybe that's not the right framing to begin with. Maybe we need to be thinking about what's really important in life, and then we'll talk about AI. So that's sort of where the concept came from. Now, I originally named it MeGPT before ChatGPT, and then I found out that MeGPT is an AI cloning service. So
Okay.
they can clone you and create your clone, and that's literally the exact polar opposite of what I'm advocating in the book.
Right.
So it became YouGPT, but that is really the fundamental concept behind it and how it ties into like the personal skills you're talking about.
No, fantastic. I think it's so necessary because the way you approach it, which I enjoy, is going back to kind of what I was commenting earlier. You can literally jump chapters, and the way you write, which I really appreciate, you can just pick up at any point in a very logical kind of way of understanding exactly what you're talking about, and it doesn't require you necessarily to go in sequential order. And I think if you are a language professional or one that is looking to get into this profession as a translator or interpreter or copywriter, any of those specialties that we work with and have specialization in, I think it's important to understand something you mentioned just a minute ago, is really kind of how you decide to implement, in what order, the use of these tools. It isn't this all or nothing. It isn't, like I know you and I both have seen content and, posts about, stay away from it, it's a threat and all these things. And I think one thing that maybe I can ask right now is, the reality that I'm sure you have seen is this isn't going anywhere, right? So it's kind of futile to kind of have the mindset of just eliminating what is, in many accounts, a helpful tool. That's one. And then number two, I think the energy we expend on, trying to defend what we do is better spent on just really realizing that there is just the fact of being irreplaceable, something that hasn't been created cannot be replaced. AI is very dependent upon information that is out there, that is fed. And we'll talk about this maybe in a little bit, of how that opens up to a lot of inaccuracies as well of things, right? Of not being current, et cetera. But the question of, accepting, I guess, that this is a reality that needs to be embraced the right way. Is that a good way of kind of looking at it, so that we can kind of lower the anxiety level and just kind of get to a place where we can learn how to make this a useful resource?
I think that's a fantastic question, because there are very legitimate concerns, and I tried to address them in the book. First of all, let me just say I'm really happy that you found the book logical and sequential and easy to read, because you can't know how much work went into that. Like, there was the original phase where I voice recorded the book. I did not type it. I wanted to try dictating the book.
Okay.
And so it was a lot of work, though. I had to move, chapters around, move paragraphs around, and it was a lot of content editing behind the scenes to try and make it flow logically. So I'm super happy to hear that, first of all. So thank you for mentioning it. In terms of like how to look at technology, I think that some translators rightfully are feeling maybe a little bit like they're being rushed into using the technology or forced to use it, because there's this paradigm of like, keep up or get left behind. And that's not something that makes us want to get on board, right? And especially when, for example, there are jobs where you might be paid less because some agency is using AI and so they're offering a lower rate, then that really compounds that feeling of like, I'm just being forced, and what, like I have to just, change the whole way I work, change my value system, fit into a mold. And I think I'm really not in favor of that. So the way that I looked at it is not the keep up or get left behind. I'm tired of that paradigm. I don't think it's helpful for anybody, and I don't like it in my own life. The way that I see it is simply, it's more almost a mindful approach of saying, let's set aside all of our presuppositions. Let's set aside what the tech bros are trying to get us to buy. Let's set aside what all the people in favor and against are saying. The simple fact of the matter is, as a pragmatist, what I see is that AI is the new electricity. It's an indisputable fact. It's not going anywhere. It's already integrated into the hardware of the things that you buy today. It's not going back in the bottle. So my question as a pragmatist is less of a philosophical approach and more like, it is here. Let's give ourselves some grace. Let's process our emotions about how this is affecting our field, the positive and the negative, because there are also some translators that are thriving with AI, right? But let's set all that aside. It is here. And so the first thing is just accepting that the world has changed, and then saying, since it is here, it's kind of like this new electricity. Well, how are we going to respond to it? Are we going to respond to it in a knee-jerk fashion? Are we going to respond to it with just sort of, recoiling in horror? Or are we going to say, we have a new technology. Let's look at what we've done with past new technologies and how we can continue to thrive. And my favorite question, which I think doesn't get asked enough, and this is why I'm currently studying AI at MIT, my favorite question is, what are other professions doing? Because believe me, there are other professions that are just as impacted as translation, and many of them are thriving, absolutely thriving like never before. So if we manage, I know it's not easy, but if we manage to set aside our emotions and to just look kind of in a cool-headed way, like the technology is here, what are some possible responses? What are other people doing? What are some constructive ways forward that we can address it? And I think we're already in much, much better place. Because if we immediately go all in, like I know people that have gone all in, their whole life is about AI. They only talk about AI. They're using it for everything. I don't think that's a very good way to go. I don't think that that's environmentally sound. I don't think it's ethically responsible. I don't think that's a good way to respond to AI. But on the other hand, the other extreme of saying, I hate AI, I'm going to do no AI, that's a choice that I think is valid. But I recommend, before deciding that you're completely against it in all its forms, maybe take the time to find out as much as you can and to look at how people are also succeeding with it, what people are doing in other professions, how they're using it to save lives in medicine, for example, or how it's being used in other fields to speed along, only to augment certain capabilities. Like, let's look at the broad range before we put on blinders. It's kind of what I'm saying with my book. So it's not for or against. It's like, let's set aside emotion and try to really understand it in a deep way and see how people are using it in ways that we can describe as collective intelligence, so adding value or augmenting, and in ways that are hurtful as well. And then let's go from there. Let's not like draw conclusions too fast. I think that's kind of a dangerous thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think, a simple example, you mentioned one of the things of like feeling forced to use it.
Right.
I've definitely been one of those people, especially the very, I guess, earlier stages. Now, like you said, it's everywhere. But, preparing an email, I still ignore it and turn it off because I want to prepare the email my way, number one. And then maybe I'll accept the suggestion or two, because I think there are, admittedly, some practical adjustments that can make it a little bit more concise or whatnot. But I think talking about integrity and cognitive atrophy and avoiding that, I think, is, again, going into this understanding to not replace your normal thought process. I think, if that's a fair way of saying it, and then seeing, is there something that perhaps I could utilize in this tool to maybe accentuate what was already there? Is that a fair way of looking at, the proper use of it, and to kind of conserve, again, your critical thinking?
Yeah, very much so. And, writing is a form of thinking. It's hard. It requires that real active engagement, but that is exactly the engagement that you need in order to build relationships, in order to develop better ideas, in order to collaborate with other people. And so I'm really against the idea of an AI writing my email and then I would tweak it. But here's what I do with my emails these days, and this may surprise you. I I have several different ways I respond to emails, but they're extremely expedient. And the number one way is, for most emails, I will open the email, I'll see what someone is writing, and I use an AI app. And so it does not write my email. I respond orally. I speak my thoughts. And what the AI does is it recognizes what I said, it transcribes it with virtually no errors ever, and it has a pre-programmed little mini prompt in it to fix grammar, add punctuation, and separate ideas into paragraphs suitable for email. So that, on average, you can speak 3 times faster than you can write for most humans.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm dispatching these emails in very, very, very little time. So this is great, but more importantly, I'm putting my heart and soul into what I'm saying. And the second way that I answer emails is for delicate emails or longer emails, where someone's saying, hey, Joe, like I have a lot of translation, like business mentoring clients, right? I think I have like 7 right now. So they work one-on-one with me to grow their business. And they'll write to me and they'll say, hey, I've been thinking about my ideal clients and here are some thoughts. And they'll send me 2 pages of text. Well, it would take a long time for me to analyze the text and then write a written response and then check it over for grammar and all the rest. And as you know, one email like that can take like an hour to answer. That's a huge chunk of your day. But I still want to give them my heart and soul and give them Joe. I don't want an AI involved. But what I will do in that case is I will literally turn on a video recording. So I have a video recording app that I use for emails to create video emails. And I use this for longer, more delicate emails, more sensitive, things that require deep thought and some back and forth. And so I literally turn on the video and I start talking. I literally read the email in real time and I'll give them my thoughts. So they're getting unfiltered Joe, and it's imperfect, but the feedback has been incredible. And I use this with translation clients too. So the translation clients, when they're like, should we use this word or that word? I'll send them back an email and I'll be like, hey, I've been thinking about this too as I'm working through the document. You mentioned XYZ factors that, this document will be read by whatever. Like right now I'm working on a series of guidebooks for teachers in Canada that are going into every single school. Like I might say, hey, I've been thinking about this pronoun and how you're talking about this and that. So this is why I've ultimately gone with that word. What do you think? Let me know if you think we can align or if we should rework it. And the feedback is incredible. Like the people are always saying like, thank you for taking the time to write this personalized email. I've never gotten an email, a video email before. But conversely, the funny thing is it actually takes me less time to just turn on the video and record a 2-minute thing. It takes me much less time, like by orders of magnitude, compared to writing a long response. And it's a lot better, I think, too, than having AI draft an email, which I personally am against that. I don't think I want to live my life just for the sake of productivity alone. I'm living my life and I have my business to help people. And so it's important to me on a personal level to infuse my heart and mind and soul into the messages I put out there. So whether it's my newsletter, my LinkedIn, or my email, I'm getting massive benefits from AI, but not because it's working for me. I'm only using it to make my content more accessible or to make it optimized for a given channel. So I'm getting like incredible benefits without having it replace my brain.
I love that. I might implement that myself. I'm going to play this back to myself and maybe implement that. Because I think some of the things that I have had conversations about with friends and colleagues are those, again, that always communicate via text or written form. And I've had that argument of certain things, going back to what you mentioned a few minutes ago, are just so drawn out when you do that,
right?
That, you're kind of getting the best of both worlds because you're, kind of, again, giving your viewpoint in a audible spoken word, but also in an electronic format. So it's a great fusion of, really doing saving the time without, kind of having that mechanical, kind of cold type of response that really lacks feeling or, again, your heart and soul, like you said. So I love that. I think I'm going to definitely see how I can implement that, because I think there has to be also some grace, like you said, with the fact that the current generation, maybe the next generation, it may not ever get to what you and I experienced when we were kind of coming up into building relationships was and these soft skills. We have to be realistic as well. So maybe that is a more attainable and very reasonable kind of expectation of a fusion of, okay, how can we do a little bit of what we enjoy doing, which is speaking and talking and sharing our heart, but also make it in a way that's palpable for those that are really, leaning toward the more, automated or, kind of electronic communication, and having that kind of happy, kind of middle ground where we can kind of both agree to something that works for everyone. And at the end of the day, I think we all, as language professionals, whether it's spoken or written, there's another element that I'd like to talk about too, which I think fits to what we're talking in this conversation, because you kind of alluded to it, of things that you would not use AI for. And it's also mentioned in your book, because you kind of, one of the chapters here talks about the confidentiality trap, if I'm not mistaken. And this is something that is part of the new technology and new learning of how to protect what is private. And so curriculums are being updated, or new curriculums are being developed, because we didn't have this kind of issue in the past of, what is appropriate, what is not appropriate, and is it really protected, and how can we avoid, a legal issue as we all at some point have to sign NDAs, and then, you have attorneys, and you have all of these different things that are built into that. And some of these things are literally just evolving every day. So how could you, and like, obviously it's a pretty broad question, but it could be overwhelming as a result of all that. If you're a language professional, what should you kind of look at so to protect yourself from those type of issues, but still utilize what could be beneficial to maybe, move along a project so that it can get done in a more efficient way?
Right on. Right on. Well, this really ties into my 3 R's that I primarily use AI for today, and that are an incredible win, because I'm using my brain for what a human brain is good at. I'm using AI for what it is good at. And it turns out the two have very, very different skills. So if you're using AI to draft your translation, but you're going to ChatGPT, that's really not compliant. There's no place on earth where that's compliant. Like, ChatGPT has been hacked multiple times. It's a known issue where people, even when they turn off the sharing feature, their data still has turned up in other accounts. There are just so many things that can go wrong, and that do go wrong all the time. So first of all, do not start putting confidential stuff into chatbots, especially in a browser. I don't want to get too much in the weeds in terms of all the different programs and the confidentiality, but it's good to give this some thought, and to make sure that you're not putting your data in places where it's going to get out. But the good news is that if you use the 3 R's I teach in my book, research, rounding out, and refining, then you don't really need to do this, right? There are so many ways that you can get value from AI by using it what it is good at. You're using it to get the best out of AI because you're using it for pattern recognition. You're using it to tease out insights. You're using it for research. It's so good. You're using it for rounding out your ideas and for refining them. You can do a lot of that without directly putting confidential info into any of these tools. This is kind of an added benefit of the 3 R's method that I teach in the book. So I also want to mention too, in terms of specifically privacy, it can be useful to take a course on this or to do a little bit of research. Like, currently, the legislation, and this is a worldwide phenomenon, we see it very, very prominently here in Canada, the legislation is lagging behind the technology. So we don't really have or we have a minimum of AI-specific legislation because we're still drawing on a patchwork of old laws and enactments that legislate over privacy. But the people who wrote that stuff, they were not thinking about AI, and AI opens up a brand new can of worms. And so it's tricky to even talk about privacy to begin with, because the law has not really caught up to the state of affairs in the world. And so even if you're compliant, you can still do something that could potentially be dangerous. So let me give you an example of this, because like a lot of, like, this is stuff that I'm learning in my own courses right now. Like, you might put information into a chatbot thinking, well, I didn't directly give away who I'm talking about. Okay, so far so good, right? Maybe that's true if you were doing a search in Google back in the day, but it turns out in aggregate, if you look at the different information, like the data points that you've provided through all of your conversations with your tool, it's easy for an expert or a data analyst or a data scientist to triangulate who you're talking about. So imagine, you might be putting data in there that you think is fine because you're just taking out some numbers or taking out someone's name. It might not be fine at all. And don't forget, these machines excel at research and at information triangulation. So it's very easy, in fact, for someone to figure out who you're talking about, and they can do some dangerous things with that data. Keep in mind, too, that if you're going through something like ChatGPT or even, other tools that are in California, like Perplexity, that people think are safe, it's still transiting from your computer to those servers, okay, in the US and coming back to you. That also means that your data is subject to the Patriot Act in the US. That means that the US government is scanning your communications. And there's precious little that they cannot do with your data. They're not even allowed to tell you if they're using your data in any way. They're literally prohibited by law. So you have to think this is very far-reaching, and you've got to be awfully careful what you put in there. You don't want to give away data that could end up producing harm. And also, again, I'm just going to open like a millionth can of worms here, but privacy is also enmeshed with ethics, because if you're using ChatGPT and paying your subscription to begin with, you're now supporting OpenAI, that's directly a partner of the US military and their current operations in the world. So, you may want to give some thought to, like, what do I ethically agree with? What do I ethically disagree with? And what companies am I willing to support, and why? Because this is really important. We're talking about the future of humanity, and there are some serious, like really, really big repercussions, especially coming a few years down the road. So the choices we make as consumers, we may think that they're very minimal, but they're actually a really, really big deal. If more people use tools, then those tools will continue to thrive. They will become the main tools. We saw how Google took over the internet space. It's possible, like my programmer friend is pretty sure that one main tool is going to win out in a few years. Well, that's going to have major worldwide repercussions, right? Mm-hmm. So as soon as we talk about privacy, it's also enmeshed with the current legal status of a lot of privacy laws, and then also the ethics. Like the two cannot be separated.
Yeah, no, that's well said and very valid. A lot of food for thought, because I think if nothing else is taken away from what you just said, is the fact that we shouldn't be blindly using these tools,
right,
without having a level of understanding of how is it going to be used, who has access to it. And I guess a simple question: is it really adding value to what I'm trying to accomplish, right? Because I think the other part of this, and I'm looking here at the time because I knew this conversation was going to be very easy, but I do want to add one more question on this train of thought, is, the fact that in the macro, the amount of energy that these data centers, right, and all of that, I'm not going to get into the weeds on that either, but that's another topic, right? This is not something that is eco-friendly. Is that a fair statement? I'm oversimplifying, but is that fair to say?
No, absolutely. And like, to give one quick example of this, when I'm on Facebook these days, I'm still seeing people regularly, influencers and stuff, creating little cute AI bunny videos and things. And I always drop a comment, even though I don't like being contentious, but I often leave a comment like, say, hey, are you aware of the environmental cost that creating one 10-second video like this is pretty much the equivalent of running your microwave for 1 hour, and it's taking away habitats from the very animals that you're depicting in your video. Like, have you given some thought to this? I try to phrase it in a way that's not going to be, I don't want to attack people, I don't want to be a troll, but if you're using AI for dumb stuff, maybe don't use AI for dumb stuff. And then if you're going to use AI for work, I think it's good to have a strategy behind it. And so that's the whole idea with the STAR framework I have in the YouGPT book, is if you take a little bit more time, exactly like you said, taking a little bit of time to think through, is it worth using AI? There's two benefits. Number one, I found that I'm using AI less because I'm thinking critically. And then often, like, after I write something or produce something, I don't want to use AI. I don't need AI. I've got all I need. So I'm using it more sparingly. And number two, when I do use it, because I've taken the time to think, I'm coming to it with a lot more useful data to tailor the output. And so I'm getting better results anyway. That's really the beating heart of the YouGPT approach. It's like, if we're more strategic, it's a win for everybody. We're using AI less and we're using it better. And suddenly you can still keep your own personality because you wrote your email first, because you did a live podcast first before you used AI to chop it up into videos, right? Like there are so many different cool illustrations of this. So I think it's very important to be strategic, exactly like you said.
Thank you. Yeah, no, you have 14 chapters in your book, YouGPT Before ChatGPT. A lot didn't make it into the book, as you've alluded to and made comment of. I do want to talk about that a little bit with the time we have left here, because I can only imagine that was a very huge task. What went into that decision making? And could you share with us a little bit of what didn't make it in the book? And perhaps will there be another edition? Is there enough for you to perhaps have a next edition of this series? Is that the plan?
So there are two main things that I would say did not make it in. There's AGI, artificial general intelligence. So what happens if computers can overperform compared to humans or outperform humans on most tasks? And the other question is, what about agentic AI? So those two, I did not include them much. First of all, because agentic is still the new kid on the block. And even though everyone is talking about it, it still remains to be seen just how widely this is used, whether any kinds of restraints are introduced, whether the problems, the issues outweigh the benefits in certain cases. Like, it's so new and it's such a wild west right now that I felt like we have to let the dust settle a little bit before talking about agentic. So if you're not familiar with agentic, this is where you can tell an AI to do stuff and it will actually do things. So it's not taking control of your computer, but it's like, it's creating a little mini program it can execute. So it can, drop an itinerary for some travel plans and go and buy the tickets and just be like, do you want this or that? And then it'll just do the thing. And there are actually a lot of applications in translation, believe it or not. I've started a little list of things you can do with agentic that would be genuinely useful for a translator. And then AGI is artificial general intelligence. I felt like that was also kind of exceeded the scope of the book. And also, I'm not a futurist. I'm not a philosopher. I'm a pragmatist. And no one really knows what to do about AGI. So if it really does happen, that's a question we'll have to grapple with as a society. And I felt like I'm not necessarily the best person to talk about what to do if AI basically gets smarter than us, as future iterations train on themselves and in theory get smarter. They may also get dumber. So keep that in mind. Like there's always alarmist people that are making money with, saying that it's the end of the world and playing Chicken Little. And then there's a lot of money to be made with that, right? And then saying like, you've got to buy my app or you've got to buy my whatever AI training thing on how to protect against the end of the world, right? Or how to get on board before you're left behind. So there are a lot of people in that camp right now. I just don't feel like the dust has really settled. So it's kind of, I'm more of like, let's be reasonable. Let's wait and see on both counts and see where things take us. I mean, I think if you ask me if AGI occurs and if AI, even if AGI does not occur, but let's say 40% of the workforce, which is knowledge workers right now, 40% of the workforce is displaced because AI really gets that good, right? And humans are barely needed anymore. What are we going to do? Well, that exceeds the scope of translation. That's like a whole society debate that we need to have. And we need to talk about universal basic income if that occurs. I don't think it's going to happen as quickly as people think, or that it's ever going to be as good, because people don't understand the nature of AI. This is a giant pattern recognition machine. And recognizing patterns alone is not enough to produce an outcome for a client, because there are data points the client or the AI doesn't have access to. There's the vibe and the intuition that only humans have. There's the human-only capability to come up with something new. And things are always evolving in the business world. So I tend to be optimistic. I don't think we're going to hit AGI anytime soon. And we've seen instances of AI getting worse, right? I've used AI sometimes and said, hey, this is worse than what I got last week. So I don't think we should jump to conclusions, but if that does happen, if AI really does improve, or we have a big leap forward, or quantum computing comes out at the same time and is able to augment AI, train on itself, and genuinely become smarter than humans, then in that case, we're going to have a separate conversation. So those did not make it into the book.
Thank you. Yeah, no, that makes logical sense. And one thing you just commented on, maybe think of another point of, how answers do vary. I've done simple kind of comparisons of my own with information I already know to be true, just to kind of test and validate. And I have found very significant discrepancies, and almost as if the bot or the chat that you're using, whatever platform, is kind of like a sycophant of, just kind of reaffirming what it feels you want to hear. So it's like, the example I recently did was of national certification for medical interpretation, which is one of the things that I help interpreters teach and everything. And I just asked a simple question of, if you're already a certified medical interpreter in one of the 7 languages that are available for oral exams, is it necessary to retake, let's say, like if in my case, I'm a Spanish certified medical interpreter, would I have to retake the test if it's for one of the other outside the 7? So like Portuguese, for example, I think I used an example, and I kind of kept it very succinct, so it wasn't very lengthy. But then the response was, oh yeah, if you speak Portuguese, you should actually retake the test for becoming a nationally certified medical interpreter, which isn't the true, accurate answer, because there's only a written exam available. Number one, there is no oral exam for Portuguese, like the thousands of other languages that are outside those 7 that are select. And so if someone is unfamiliar with the topic and kind of takes it at its word, you're going to be misled and make decisions based off of inaccurate information. That sounds very legitimate because the way it was articulated, it's very convincing. But again, that's just a simple example of, how we have to be very careful. And I think word of advice that I usually give people is just test the waters, test with something you already know to be true. And then maybe it could be part of it phrasing, because I know it's very delicate with that, how you phrase something, how you ask, but sometimes it's just faulty as well. It's just not accurate. Is that fair?
It's a probability machine, right? So it's drawing on the range of probabilities from all of its training, and it's also stochastic. So it's going to produce a different answer every single time you ask. So it can sound authoritative. At the end of the day, we're talking about probabilities. So it's figuring out the probability of the next word that it's always the next word in terms of how it works. And it's often going to tell you what you want to hear, but does not mean that it's true necessarily. So there are ways that you can prompt to narrow the field of probabilities, by, doing role prompting and a few other things. But at the end of the day, it's always going to make some stuff up. It's always going to be wrong with some stuff. And you can see this in particular if you ask it about sort of more open-ended questions like, what should my business strategy be? And I literally do this just for fun in my trainings. I'll often have I'll ask ChatGPT on the left, I'll do the split view in Chrome, and I'll ask on the left, what should my business strategy be? Here's a bunch of information. And then on the right, I'll ask it the same prompt. And in just as with an equally authoritative voice, gives me 2 totally different answers. Oh, wow. And so it's a great way to make sure we keep our critical thinking, to remember its probabilities. It's going to produce a different answer every time. And so it's extraordinarily good at what I call the 3 R's, but it's not necessarily, you don't want to go to ChatGPT to get factual information. Like one study found that up to 40% of the so-called facts cited by ChatGPT came from Reddit, because Reddit is a partner in OpenAI's training. So it's used extensively in their data sets. You can use other tools that are fact-checked that will do a better job, but you cannot take AI at its word. You're absolutely right on that.
Thank you. So this will be kind of, as we wrap up, last few minutes. Number one, I appreciate the conversation. It's been fantastic. I would like to invite you back, actually, because Patrice and I have our Language Mentors community, and I think we just scratched the surface of topics that we enjoy talking about, and I think our community would love. So maybe we'll have to have you back, whether it's on my channel, Tuned In with InterSys, or maybe if you're willing to join Patrice and I, have you on our language mentors, group session. But as we kind of wrap up, how can someone find your book? Obviously, it's on Amazon. That's how I bought mine. Is it available outside of Amazon? Is that the best way of purchasing your book? Is that
Yeah,
the
so
preferred method?
Right. For the time being, it's up on Amazon.com or whatever regional variant you use. And you simply look up the title YouGPT Before ChatGPT. It's up for $4.97. So my goal was not to make a profit with this book. I'll be super happy if I cover the production expenses. My goal is to put this in as many hands as possible to challenge current paradigms and to provide what I hope is a better way forward with AI for all of us, including in language professions. I'm hoping to make it available through other bookstores. It's also currently being translated into French.
Nice.
So I'm looking forward to making it available in more formats. I'd like to record an audiobook as well. I've put a lot of love into my two books, AI Resilient and YouGPT Before ChatGPT. So this is on my radar because I really believe with all my heart that we're stronger together when we think about these things together and we use our own brains before turning to AI, then we can find solutions. There are ways that we can create collective intelligence and continue to create lots of value in the language professions and continue to thrive. So yeah, you can find the book on Amazon. You can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Joachim Lépine. You can put that in the show notes if you want,
Sure.
but I'd be happy to connect with anyone who just wants to keep the conversation going.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think I definitely want to keep the conversation going, but I want to respect your time. It's been really a fun conversation. I think one thing I'll share, and I gave you enough moment to share any final thoughts, is the message here is that there isn't anything going to replace in the near future, for certain, replacing the value of bespoke human translators, interpreters, and creatives. I think that's really encouraging. Your book definitely helps us see that. And I think the other part of this is that there is value in, embracing some of the components that can actually accentuate our profession, the art that we do, and not to run away from it, but to just learn. And I think, I want to commend you for educating us in such an easy way to understand the way you write. I think it's just very easy to follow, and it keeps you kind of connected to what exactly we need to be aware of. And I think it is a opportunity for anyone who is looking to learn about AI in a very simple way without feeling overwhelmed. They should just buy your book. So again, I encourage our viewers, our community to do that. Joachim Lépine, Lion Translation Academy, best-selling author. Please go out there and support. We need more publications like this. Again, the publication and the book is YouGPT Before ChatGPT. You can find it on Amazon. It's a steal, and it's something that's going to definitely help you build your confidence and hopefully help you continue to be creative and be strategic and continue improving your critical thinking. Any final comments or thoughts you wanted to share, Joachim?
Right on. I just want to thank you for having me on. I think what you're doing is brilliant, and we need more content like this to help all of us to wrap our heads around this complex topic and to find positive ways forward. And you're a very important part of the conversation. So thank you, Johnny, for doing this, and thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Well, I am Johnny Romero with Tuned In with InterSys. Thank you for joining me. If you found this content useful, helpful, encouraging, like, subscribe, share, and until next time, are you tuned in?